I've seen too many people splurge on a big screen that ends up looking flat, washed out, or just plain disappointing after the excitement wears off. The cheap 4K LED panels that promise cinema-like immersion often fall short when you finally sit down for a movie night, and that regret can feel pricey. So the question I'm really trying to answer today is whether the LG 77-inch OLED evo C4 gives you a smarter, less regrettable buy. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When you're staring at a wall that's suddenly a 77-inch window to whatever you're watching, the first hesitation is always the cost versus the actual improvement you'll see day to day. A lot of us have lived through the big TV, small difference scenario, where a larger LED just looks like a bigger version of the same picture quality you already have. The risk with a TV this size is also practical. Will it fit your living room layout? Will the brightness be enough for daytime viewing? And will you actually use the high-end features instead of letting them gather dust? Those are the concerns I dug into before hitting the record button. Let's start with the basics that matter when you actually plug this thing in. The C4 is an OLED with self-lit pixels, which means each tiny dot can turn completely off for perfect black levels. In my own testing, that translates to a more convincing lights-out moment during a dark thriller. The shadows are truly opaque, not just a shade of gray. The Evo branding adds a brightness booster, so the screen can push around 700 nits at peak, which is a noticeable step up from older OLEDs that struggled in well-lit rooms. It's still not as bright as a top-tier LED, but for most living rooms with some ambient light, it feels bright enough without washing out the colors. The picture processing is handled by LG's A9 Gen 7 AI processor. What that does in real life is take a 1080p YouTube video or a compressed Netflix stream and upscale it so it looks a lot closer to native 4K. I tried a low-budget documentary that was originally shot in 720p, and the upscaling smoothed out the edges without the usual halo effect you see on cheaper models. The result is a cleaner, more detailed image that makes the extra money feel justified, especially if you're a binge watcher who watches a mix of high and low-resolution content. Now, let's talk about the two features that often drive people to OLED in the first place: HDR and sound. The TV supports Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos, so when you pair it with a decent soundbar or a home theater receiver, you get that cinema-like height-channel audio that makes explosions feel three-dimensional. In a side-by-side comparison with a 4K LED TV that only has HDR10, the LG's HDR peaks were more vivid, and the colors stayed true even in bright scenes. The Atmos side didn't magically replace a full speaker setup, but it gave a clear sense of space that ordinary TV speakers lack. Gaming is another real-world use case that often gets overlooked in big TV reviews. The C4 runs at a native 144 Hz refresh rate, which is a nice selling point for competitive gamers who need fluid motion. More importantly, the input lag measured on a PlayStation 5 was sitting around 12 milliseconds, which is well within the range where you won't notice any delay. I played a fast-paced shooter for a couple of hours, and the motion felt buttery smooth, with the OLED's near-instant pixel response eliminating any ghosting. The only caveat is that the HDMI ports on the C4 support 4K 120Hz but not the full 48 gigabits per second bandwidth of the newest HDMI 2.1 features, so if you plan to use advanced variable refresh rate (VRR) modes on next-gen consoles, you'll be limited to the base 120Hz mode. The Magic Remote with built-in Alexa is a convenience that actually works in day-to-day life. Point the remote at the screen and scroll through apps, or ask Alexa to turn on the lights without leaving the couch. The voice commands are reliably understood for basic tasks like play Stranger Things or open YouTube, though they're not as robust as a dedicated Echo device for complex routines. Still, the hands-free aspect adds a layer of ease that feels genuine rather than gimmicky. What about the downsides that often get buried under the hype? First, the brightness ceiling, even with the Evo Boost, still means you'll see some glare if you place the TV opposite a large window. I tried watching a sunny daytime sports broadcast and noticed that the whites looked slightly pastel compared to a high-end LED. If your living room gets a lot of direct sunlight, you might need blackout curtains or a different panel technology. Second, OLED's self-lit nature carries the infamous risk of image retention. I ran a static news ticker for an hour, and after turning it off, a faint ghost of the ticker lingered for a few minutes before fading. It wasn't permanent, but it reminded me that you need to avoid static UI elements for extended periods. Finally, the WebOS Smart Platform is smooth for most streaming.